Welcome again to the Creighton Research Roadshow here in Phoenix. This is a two-part series that we're going to be presenting. The first will be a little bit more of a general contact and general information regarding the research processes in Phoenix. And then the second, which will be in the spring of next year, will be a little bit more on the research compliance elements. So that's kind of where we're going to start today. If we could advance the slide and one more. Perfect. So the table of contents here, these are the general areas that we're going to touch on today. And again, this presentation is an overview of research contacts, research resources, those sorts of things within the Creighton system in Phoenix. If you're specifically interested in a workshop on how to perform the nuts and bolts of research, we actually do have that available for our faculty on the Creighton Jade website. Dr. Ryan Walter is an amazing presenter, has a comprehensive workshop on all the different elements inside of development of a research proposal. That's an amazing resource for us. And if you have interest in that, please feel free to reach out to myself, to Miguel to get access to the Jade website. Today will be a little bit more of a presentation and an overview specifically on some of the contacts and some of the research resources that we have. So go ahead and advance the slide. So we're going to start out a little bit with research contacts, data, and grants for this initial presentation. Here we have the Phoenix Office of Research Contacts. Myself, Dan Gridley, Assistant Dean of Clinical Research and also Chair of Radiology. We've got Dr. Jeff Curtis. He is the Vice Chair in the Department of Clinical Research and Public Health and is a recovering Assistant Program Director for the Family Medicine Residency. Amazing leader in the department. We have Dr. Pooja Dorman, who is a faculty member within the Department of Clinical Research and Public Health. And she does an amazing job with supporting research and mentoring our learners, predominantly on the St. Joe's campus, but definitely has helped out in many areas on both campuses. And then last and certainly not least, probably last and most important for everyone listening today will be Miguel Labrego, who is our program manager of scholarly activity. Miguel is an amazing first point of contact for anything and everything that is clinical research for Creighton and Phoenix. If you're going to take down, please feel free to take down any of our contact information here. Please feel free to reach out to any of us. But I must say that Miguel is a spectacular resource for everyone. And if you have questions, he's actually one of the first people that does just a spectacular job for us. So Miguel is amazing. And moving on here, so one thing that I'd be remiss if I did not cover is some of the research interest groups here in Phoenix. There were approximately 14 department or division specific research interest groups and or journal clubs in Phoenix, and these will vary depending upon the department, but they will be attended by a mix of faculty, residents. Sometimes you'll have fellows, sometimes you'll have medical students, even regulatory specialists, statisticians, and informatics individuals will be part of these meetings. We had one in radiology a week and a half ago, and had really great attendance with the faculty, great attendance with residents, and then amazing attendance with medical students, dozens of medical students. So very exciting to see really the expansion of these research interest groups on the campus here in Phoenix. Some of these will go through ongoing projects, will be status updates. We'll talk about roadblocks to the research process. We'll look at pre-proposal stuff in some of these interest groups. We'll look at like, hey, should I be doing this? Is this going to be a feasible project? Does the study design look good to you? Those sorts of things. And then even we'll go through some of the completed projects. So you'll look at the completed projects analysis, the abstract, the manuscript preparation, and all those sorts of things. So this is a very, very important resource for our research interested faculty and learners in the Creighton Phoenix system, there is a click me. Now, obviously, we're not going to be able to click the air. So Dr. Seaman has astutely pointed out that all of these slides, and actually significantly more content than these slides, will be available in a PowerPoint presentation that we'll share the link to after this presentation. So not only will you be able to kind of copy and paste or click links out of our emails if you want to contact us, but then this research interest group calendar, which is actually a link to a really good Excel spreadsheet that goes by department when the research interest groups are, and actually a link for those that have a Zoom or hybrid option are available. So it's a really, really, I think, important thing to have access to for our researchers. And moving on, so library access. So this is important. Obviously, for somebody going through the research process, you have your hypothesis, kind of what's next as you move down the line. You're going to want to look at a literature search or a lit review. So everyone, importantly, is going to need access to the library. Everyone with faculty appointments with Creighton and all of our Creighton fellows, residents, and medical students have access to the Creighton library. Karina Kletcher has been a great resource within the Creighton library. She does an amazing job of actually looking at different ways to perform literature searches through PubMed and multiple other actual resources for that as well. Obviously, this is an extremely important part of the research process, doing a literature search, because that's going to be one of the first couple of things you're doing when you're looking at study design. You're going to see, hey, okay, my hypothesis looks good, but what am I going to? Has somebody done this already? What sort of different ideas that are similar to mine have actually already been performed? And so this library access is going to be a critical component to the research process as you're going through study design development. And so here's some links to Karina and her team. Here's a link, or here's a note for ValueWise library. So the ValueWise library, and it's just one line here, which does not do it's given its amazing review that it should get, and that is the ValueWise library is one resource that I use with relative frequency. They do an amazing job of even gathering the information inside of a literature search. So if I send them a search phrase, a search topic with Boolean kind of and or type of phraseology, they are amazing at putting that in, developing a list of different publications that are usually by title with maybe some quick abstract information, send it back to me in a PDF or email format. And I can look at all of them. I can actually then kind of copy and paste or find the PubMed IDs that I think are most applicable to the study that I'd like to perform. I'll send those back to the library. They'll pull all the articles for me and send them back to me in PDF format. They do a spectacular job and make my life so much easier when it comes to performing literature search and literature review. And then the St. Joseph's Library with information on their contact number as well as their email also provides a great service for our researchers in that they will assist with pulling articles for the faculty that work at the Dignity system. And then just a little bit of additional contact information or additional information regarding badge or IT access requests for St. Joe's and for Barrows. Again, this is a lot of information thrown at you very quickly. And so again, these will all be available on the presentation the PowerPoint presentation that we'll send a link to after today's grand rounds. Next slide, patient data. So this is an important topic, critically important. As we go through kind of the research study design process, you'll come up with your hypothesis. Okay, it's a great question. This is a great topic. We'll go through and look at and do our lit review and our lit search. Okay, this hasn't been done yet. Okay, great. So now we're kind of moving on. Okay, do we have the patients that we need? So this is something that's really, really important for the researcher to determine, are there enough patients for the study that we're interested in? And so there's something called the prep for research, which some people will call feasibility analysis. And it does need to be completed before developing the study proposal that would be submitted to the IRB, because there's very significant information that's contained within the inclusion or exclusion criteria that you're looking for the study of interest. So if you, and this is important, that you have to sit down, you have to kind of go through all of the different elements that you're looking for the patient cohort that you're going to be anticipating for your study. And that goes through all the way through all these different elements, the diagnoses, the procedures, the different prescriptions, the fun ICD-9, ICD-10 codes that might be associated with it, all of the different basic demographic information, all the outcomes. So all these different elements need to be specified and kind of outlined as you're developing the study proposal. And the reason why this is critically important is twofold, and this is perfect. You can actually go to that next slide. This is great, in that when you submit these data elements to the IRB, they must all be there. So as you're going through this and you're looking at your feasibility, also know that you're actually going to be submitting all of these different elements to the IRB. So it's critically important to put these different elements. And here's an example for the data collection sheet of all the different elements that you want to be outlined within your study cohort. And then that would ultimately be sent to the IRB for approval. And then again, twofold. One, this data has to go to the IRB, and then also you need to have it for the feasibility analysis or the different data collection analyses that are going to be performed. So if you go ahead and click through a couple of those points here. So list every variable to be collected, absolutely. And again, the IRB reviews every bit of this information, the protected health information. So you have to include it inside of this in order to go to the IRB to be approved for then you to pull that information later on. And again, you can only collect the data for the variables that you've actually listed on here. And the format will vary depending upon institution. REDCap is available at the majority of the respective institutions within our partnership with Creighton. But there are even different flavors of REDCap from one institution to another. So it's kind of, they're relatively institution specific ways to do your data collection in the way that you store your data. Going on. So electronic data abstraction is an important mechanism. There's actually manual and then there's electronic. And electronic's important in that this seems like it potentially would have the most strength in order for you to pull the majority of the patients out to determine, hey, do we have enough patients in order to move forward with our study? And you look at Cerner, you look at Epic, you look at the different electronic medical record systems that our partners have, and there are very powerful ways in order to perform the data abstraction, but there are some significant limitations here as well. So as you can see here, if you use the ICD-9, ICD-10 codes for chronic kidney disease, you'll miss about 40% of the patients. If you look at just congestive heart failure and you're like, I'm going to pull my favorite ICD-10 code for CHF and see what we got within the database, it's stored 600 different ways inside of the electronic medical record. It is a very challenging process. It is my favorite still way to do this, the feasibility analysis and then subsequent abstraction of the data. But this is an iterative process. This is a process that you have to continue to work at it. Okay, we've got, we have 10 patients that say out of 2 million that have CHF. Clearly, we have to go back to the data and look at this a little bit differently, because clearly that's not correct. And so this is an iterative process. It's extremely important that you kind of work with your IT teams to see whether or not you are generating or garnering the correct and accurate data for your cohort. And so just a general overview of the process for patient data. So again, we talked about you have to determine whether or not there's enough patients. And so there's actually a form inside of Amedris for Dignity that's called Prep for Research, that anyone working in the Dignity system can pull that sheet and can get that information. You can fill out the sheet and you can send it back for retrospective chart reviews to determine whether or not you have an adequate sample size to move forward with your study. Obviously, if you think, hey, this is an amazing hypothesis, the study's amazing, we did our lit search, everything's looking spectacular, no one's done this before, and you send this in and they say there are 2 patients inside of our system, you may not have enough data there, and the cohort may not be big enough for you to move forward at that point. So it's extremely important to make sure that you do the prep for research, or you do your feasibility ahead of time to determine whether or not you have enough patients for your study. For Dignity, they have prep for research, and there's some other mechanisms with the research assistants that can work through the process. At ValleyWise, my favorite is the slicer dicer. Not extraordinarily accurate and not perfect for electronic abstraction of all of your data for your study, but it does a reasonably good job of giving a high-level overview of the total number of patients that may be within your cohort or study. And so I think it's a relatively strong way to do a quick feasibility analysis for research at ValleyWise. Again, there are clinical research assistants and coordinators and research managers at ValleyWise also, which will be listed in the presentation that will be linked at the end, that will be able to assist as well. And they are amazing. They truly are. I'd name names, but I'd forget 1 or 2. The whole team there just does an amazing job at ValleyWise as well. Okay, this is great. We've got great hypothesis. We did our lit search. Everything's looking amazing. We did our feasibility analysis. We got a ton of patients in the cohort. This is going to have statistical significance. Amazing. We're moving forward. So then moving forward and getting that patient data, we'll submit all of that information to the IRB. Obviously, as a reminder, you're not to go into the electronic medical record and dig in the patient chart specifically until you have that IRB approval. So these feasibility analyses are general overviews of patient populations. They aren't specific to a specific patient. So you're not opening up a patient's chart specifically necessarily to do this. They're more of a general overview. So once you obtain that IRB approval, then that's the point at which you can go in and start opening the patient's charts. And then there are some different processes that exist within our healthcare systems. And so there's one of our healthcare systems that issues something called a go letter, which is the data acquisition from the EMR that is potentially ready for you to move forward with looking at patient-specific information. And we'll have 2 links inside of here for the Dignity process and the ValleyWise process. But this is when you have your IRB approval, and then subsequently, hey, you're great to go and to look into the patients. You're great. You're approved to go in and kind of dig in to the EMR to look at these patients that would be part of the cohort for your study. And then that's when you can obtain your data. So that's when you do your data collection. It may be a manual data abstraction, not my favorite, but we do that. And then electronic data abstraction. Again, this it takes a little bit more time in the front end, but it's very, very powerful once you have this squared up nicely. And then obviously, either case, you need to do this in a way that's going to be stored securely. So a fun slide on data storage and security, but an extremely important slide as a reminder of the different elements of kind of the nevers, which never save data on your desktop or local computer. Don't save it on a USB drive unless it's a specifically approved iron key secured drive. Don't save the patient data to the cloud unless it's a secured and approved mechanism to do so. And then never email the patient data that's not anonymized to anyone to anyone. Let's leave it there. And there are significant repercussions for mishandling patient data. This hasn't happened very many times, but it has happened, and there are significant repercussions to this. So just some things to consider, to keep in the front of your mind. Very important. All right, as we're flying through this, I wanted to go through and give a very brief overview of who do we send or which IRB do we engage for what type of project. And this is an ongoing developing process. So please understand that this is reasonably accurate for today, but may change in the near future, depending upon reliance agreements and other negotiations and discussions amongst our partners. And so the slide is, which IRB do I need approval from? And generally, if the study that you're performing is using student, resident, fellow, or faculty, Creighton faculty. So again, Creighton medical student, Creighton resident, Creighton fellow, Creighton faculties as as the subjects of your research, that scenario does need to be acknowledged or formally sent through the Creighton Institutional Review Board, or IRB, to review to make sure that is approved. Again, if the subjects of your research are Creighton learners or faculty, we need to engage the Creighton IRB. If the patients within the cohorts of your study arise from the St. Joe's side of our partnership, then we would go through the Dignity IRB for approval. If they arise from the Valleywise, if the patients come from the Valleywise healthcare system, then we would move through the Valleywise IRB for IRB approval. And then we have a number of examples where the patients will actually be drawn from both St. Joseph's and from Valleywise. And so in that scenario, we would go through and get IRB approval from either one of the IRBs. And then we have some reliance agreements, which are continuing to evolve between the healthcare systems and partnerships, where if you obtain IRB approval from one, it will then go to the other for typically an expedited review of the other IRB for it to be approved. Again, there are small caveats, there are small differences. If you have questions here, I beg you, please reach out to Miguel. He has worked feverishly on this process in these ever-changing variables and trying to get this, all of our arms around all of this. But if you have questions, please reach out. We're more than happy to assist and to help work through these different algorithms for our IRB needs. And so that will be a wrap. If we can move on to the next slide of my part of this presentation. So now we're going to bring in the brains and the beauty of the research team, and that is the amazing Dr. Jeff Curtis, who will go through a little bit more on the investigator-initiated clinical research projects by alliance partners, to include the onboarding and contacts, and everyone's favorite topic, he will dig in a little bit deeper into the IRB. So, Dr. Curtis, if you would, take it away. Thank you very much.
Okay, let's go ahead to the next slide. So I'm going to talk a little bit about IRBs and levels of approval with IRBs, and then talk a little bit about the specific IRBs that we have to go through. I don't want to do this at too basic a level, but if there are people in the audience, whether online or here, who really are new to this process, I want to make sure you understand. IRB stands for Institutional Review Board. Every organization that conducts human subject research is required by federal regulations to have an institutional review board. Often people say IRB and they mean the entire process of getting approval for a study, which involves much more than the IRB proper, the IRB specifically. There's feasibility review, there's scientific review, there's contracting, there's all of that sometimes investigators just lump into, yeah, my project's with the IRB waiting for approval. I'm going to talk very narrowly and specifically about the Institutional Review Board. There are different levels of approval from institutional review boards. The first is exempt. There is a specific category that the IRB could designate to say your proposed study is exempt from review. You still need to submit. The IRB is who makes that determination. The investigator does not make that determination. Now, a couple of examples that are shown here are case reports and QI studies. Technically, that's a little bit different. Technically, those are generally deemed not human subject research. There's a list of specific scenarios or specific study types in the Code of Federal Regulations that are designated as being exempt from IRB review, but still they have to be submitted to the IRB, and the IRB makes that determination. And for a QI project, depending on how it's interpreted, it could be deemed exempt, or it could be deemed not human subject research, or it could be deemed a project that needs IRB review and ongoing approval. Merely writing up a study, proposing a study, and putting quality improvement project in the title or in the description of the study will not make it exempt from review. The IRB will review it to determine if the objectives and the methods are more consistent with quality improvement or more consistent with human subject research, and they'll review it according to the objectives and the methods. Now, the fact that you might want to present the results or even publish the results does not inherently make it a research project and not a QI project. It's about objectives and methods. But for most QI projects, since they involve review of aggregate data, not individual specific patient data, and they don't involve the objective of contributing to generalizable knowledge. They're more about improving a process or improving an outcome locally for the next patient and changing a process so that we generally get better outcomes locally. That's not part of the definition of human subject research, and that's why they end up being either exempt or deemed not human subject research and not requiring ongoing review. So you might be asking, why would I submit something like that to the IRB then? Well, if you have any thought of at some point presenting the results or publishing the results, even at a local or regional conference like Academic Excellence Day or Creighton University Research Week, when you submit, you'll be required to show that the project has been reviewed and approved by an IRB. And if you get a letter from the IRB saying we reviewed this and we determined that it is not human subject research and therefore not requiring ongoing review, or we feel that this meets the exempt study criteria, that is sufficient to submit to the conference organizers, or if you're going to submit it for publication, to submit to the journal editor so that you can have original data included in your presentation or publication. And that's generally required in conferences and journals these days. But an exempt study generally does not involve individual identifiable patient data, so there's no risk. The only thing the IRB is concerned with is human subject protection. That is their total reason for existence. And that doesn't just mean protecting them from a harmful intervention in a clinical trial. That means protecting their data as well. So if you've got a study that doesn't involve any identifiable individual patient data, that's most likely either going to be exempt or deemed not human subject research. And there are fairly loose criteria. You usually don't have to have a very specific protocol that you submit, although I recommend it, because if you put a lot of work into developing the protocol up front, then when you go to present or publish the results, you can just, or to write up the paper, you can just copy and paste from the introduction and the methods sections right into your manuscript. Next slide, and I promise I'm not going to take that long on every slide. So an expedited study, a lot of investigator-initiated studies that involve patient data are expedited. Expedited means it's reviewed by either the IRB chair or a senior member of the institutional review board, again, using the term IRB very narrowly, very specifically to mean that board. It's reviewed by one person and they indicate, I recommend approval of this study. And then the IRB at their next meeting, the full board kind of ratifies that decision. But approval can be done by the chair or a senior member of the IRB. You do have to have a formal protocol written up and submitted, and you have to go through city training and all the research preliminaries. You have to submit a CV. You have to submit a conflict of interest form, and the expedited reviews generally, depending on the IRB, sometimes they don't expire. Some IRBs will make them expire. And so you might have to renew it if you don't get it done within one cycle, which usually is a year. But they're easy to renew, and the IRBs do request that you close them out at the end of the study. Most, again, of the investigator-initiated studies that involve review of patient data will be expedited studies because you'll have identifiable individual patient data. And like Dr. Gridley said, there's an obligation to protect that data. All three organizations that have IRBs that you might need to submit to, Dignity Health, Valleywise Health, and Creighton University, use REDCap for their data storage. REDCap is a secure data storage application in the cloud, and the data will be stored there. You can pull data from there to put into SAS or Stata or SPSS or whatever to do your data analysis. But when you do that, you'll pull it de-identified. So according to their rules, you will never have identifiable data on a flash drive or on your laptop. Could you figure out some way to circumvent that? Yeah, you probably could. I strongly encourage you not to. You've all heard stories of some NIH investigator who left their laptop in their car and ran into the grocery store and came back out and the laptop was stolen. And it ends up being a huge deal. For organizations like us, there could be enormous fines. There would be terrific public embarrassment. Each of the patients whose data was involved in that breach would have to be individually contacted by the clinical partner, Dignity Health or Valleywise Health, and an explanation would have to be made about how their data were lost and why their data were lost, and it would be very costly to the organization. And in the most extreme case, the organization could be at risk for losing its federal-wide assurance, which is a contract that's executed with the federal government saying we will follow the rules of human subject protection. And if that federal-wide agreement is lost, or federal-wide assurance is lost, then no further research can be conducted until it's regained. And boy, I think there are a lot of investigators here that at Norton or at Barrow or at the Cancer Center who would be very unhappy with you if you were the one who caused the federal-wide assurance to be lost. So let's move to the next slide. A full study submission. This is like a randomized clinical trial that involves some risk to the study participants. It has to be reviewed by the full study. The PI has to be prepared to present the study to the IRB, although at least at Dignity Health, several years ago, the IRB stopped having PIs routinely present their studies for initial approval. But there may be some questions that come back to you. And they have to be approved. They have to be approved on an ongoing basis, reviewed and approved. And 1 year is the longest time that they'll be approved for. Sometimes it's 6 months, sometimes it's 3 months, depending on the risk of the study. But they have to be renewed on an ongoing basis until they're completed. And everybody involved in the study has to submit all their research preliminaries. They have to do city training and have it up to date. Every 3 years, that has to be renewed. If you've done that, you know what a complete pain that is, but it's required. They have to do the conflict of interest and submit updated CVs and all that kind of stuff. Everybody on the team has to do that and has to maintain those updated. So there are 3 IRBs that we would potentially be concerned with. There's the Creighton University IRB, which is based in Omaha, but it's the one Creighton IRB. There's not a Phoenix Creighton IRB. Anytime a student or resident is involved in a study, it's required to be at least logged with the Creighton IRB. As Dr. Gridley said, if it's a study that involves data from patients at Dignity Health, then the Dignity Health IRB is the IRB of record. That they own the data, they own the patients, they're responsible for those patients and their data. Their IRB would be the one to review it. But once it's approved, if a student or resident is involved, that information has to be sent to the Creighton IRB so that they can track the involvement of students and residents in their studies. Dr. Gridley reviewed this. A little bit confusing on the first dark box there. The Creighton University IRB would be the IRB of record if the data is not involving partner data or patients, not involving any patient data from Valleywise or Dignity Health. But if it does involve Creighton University students, faculty, or staff, if you're doing a study that involves a survey or measurements of Creighton University students, then it has to be approved by the Creighton University IRB. So not just being involved in the study, but being the subjects of the study. If Creighton University students, faculty, and staff are the subjects of the study, then Creighton University IRB would be the IRB of record. The partner IRBs would be if they involve partner data or patients, then they would be the primary IRBs, the IRB of record, but involvement of Creighton learners would have to be logged with the Creighton IRB. This is the Creighton IRB office staff. You'll have access to this when you get the slides after this is over. Now, the Dignity Health IRB, and there's a fair amount of overlap in the next sets of slides between Dignity Health and Valley West Health. We asked them actually what information they wanted us to share, and they gave us some ideas of what they wanted. And there's some overlap, but not complete overlap. This is important, unfortunately, for everybody. We wish there was a way to this to make it easier. You have to do city training. If you've done it before, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't done it before, it's all about human subject protection, and it takes much longer than you think it's going to take. Plan on a weekend. Block the whole weekend out and do your city training. And you have to do it about every 3 years. But we all have to do it. It's kind of like those modules that you have to do every year with the clinical partners. And there are several that need to be done: the human subject protection, education, basic courses, biomedical research, et cetera, good clinical practice. Those are generally required for everybody. So what you do is when you create or renew your city program account, you affiliate yourself with specific organizations. I would recommend that you affiliate yourself both with Creighton University and with whatever primary clinical partner you work with if you're a clinician, and then go through all of the required modules for each of them. There will be overlap, but there will also be some specific modules that you have to do for each of the individual organizations you associate with. And then make sure the city certificates get sent to whichever IRB is going to be reviewing your studies. Next slide. And then this is going to be important. I'm not going to go through all this and say who all these people are and what they do, but this will be available for you on the slide set when you get it. Next slide. And then Valleywise Health, same kind of information for them. Next slide. These are the important contacts from Valleywise Health with regard to research. And then next slide. One difference, at Valleywise Health, students, not residents, have to get an adjunct research associate designation. They have to submit an application for that. The instructions are all here. You'll have access to the instructions. They have to submit that and get approved for that in order to get access to data, in order to really participate in a project at all. Dignity Health does not have a similar designation, but Valleywise Health does. It's actually not difficult to do. It's quite a simple process, but it is a step you have to go through with Valleywise Health if you want to have a student involved in your project. And they have to do the city training and all the other research preliminaries. Next slide. And if you need help with your study, this is from Valleywise Health, so it has specific information for Valleywise Health. But both organizations, both clinical partners, Valleywise and Dignity Health, have research templates available through their IRB websites. They use different IRB applications. Dignity uses iMedris, Valleywise uses Axiom Mentor, Creighton uses InfoEd. Each is a little bit different, but Valleywise and Dignity each have research templates that are really easy to use. And for a simple study, sometimes the protocol that you put together using that template is a page and a half long. You just follow the template and put in the information they need. If you do a really good job with that, as I said before, you can copy and paste it into the introduction and methods section of your paper. But it is required that you write up a protocol, but you don't have to invent the entire format of the protocol yourself. Follow the template. It makes it much, much easier. I think that's all of my part of this. Do you have any questions about any of that? You'll have my information too, Jeff Curtis. Please feel free to email me, call me, whatever. I'm happy to try to answer questions and help steer you a little bit. Miguel is the mastermind. He's the one that really knows these processes better than any of us. Please use us. And with that, Dr. Gridley, am I turning it back to you?
We will be going to Dr. Dorman if she is available.
I am available. Hi, it's nice to meet you all. I'm Pooja Dorman. I'm the OBGYN chair for Dignity Health Medical Group, and I'm also part of the research faculty here at Creighton, and I wanted to share with you all a little bit about the resources we have available for research here. Jeff, can you all hear me okay before I get into it?
Yes.
Okay, great. So national databases exist. There's about a 2-year lag in the data available, but they're publicly available, de-identified, and HIPAA compliant. You'd still have to go through the IRB specific to your institution that you're working with, whether that's Creighton or Dignity or Valleywise. Most of these databases do have a cost associated with them. Miguel, you can go to the next slide. These are some of the publicly available data sets, and the cost is not prohibitive as far as gaining access. You can go to the next slide. The issue is more around the management of that data. So I'm going to just talk a little bit more about that before going on to grant opportunities. So the main barrier to using one of those large publicly available data sets is not really the cost. It's more the data management and the statistical expertise needed to really do high quality analysis that would result in a publication for any of these large data sets. So in Omaha, there is a team that can work with students and faculty and residents on these projects. We hope in the near future we will have a similar support infrastructure and a statistical team here in Phoenix that can manage these databases and help you with querying them to get the data that you need to perform the results and write your paper. But at this moment, my advice is actually to maybe hold off on doing a large data set project until we have that infrastructure in place. And once we do, like I said, it's not cost prohibitive to access these. Okay, we can go on. So internal grants. So the other part of research that people often have questions about is funding their research. So there are internal grant opportunities at Valleywise and at Dignity Health. Creighton also has internal funding opportunities. Now these funds are often smaller, but more accessible to young faculty, to residents, people who are starting their careers and starting their research portfolio. And 2-year grants around 50,000, 20,000 grants are not unusual. I have residents who are using the Valleywise Health Foundation grant for smaller projects, and they are very accessible. We can help you with those application processes if you need help. The St. Joseph's Foundation also has opportunities for projects, and actually have its funding mechanism up to, I think it's 500,000. So it's it can be used for larger projects as well. We just need to go through the application and try to qualify for those funding mechanisms. And it's not nearly as daunting to pursue these internal grant opportunities as it is to pursue federally funded grants. We can go to the next page. So external grant opportunities. So these are slightly more challenging. Oftentimes these larger grants want the research team to have some research credentials, papers, projects that they have completed already, smaller projects that demonstrate that the team is successful at completing research. And so oftentimes these external grant opportunities are really good for people who have already done some research and have some support already built either within their department or between themselves and maybe another institution, like maybe with ASU or in collaboration with U of A. And, the research team then can apply for these external grant opportunities and have a little bit more success at getting funded. Go on. Make sure that you take into account. Yeah, so all of these funding mechanisms, whether you're talking about internal funding or external funding, typically have gates. So they'll have a time frame in which they accept applications, and then turnaround time, and then the actual disbursement of funds. And it's not unusual for that whole process to be a year. So if you are planning a project, take that timeline into account. And that's it for that